Hey, 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 you know what time it is? Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Okay, real quick. Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Chris. I had to take a couple of days off because we just finished the last unicorn on Instagram, and then Thanksgiving happened, which hopefully everybody had an awesome Thanksgiving holiday. I would like to take a quick moment of silence. Um, I just found out, as most people have, I'm sure, that Stephen Sondheim, who has to be one of the best musical composers of our time, has died at 91 years old. And that really it definitely sucks because West Side Story's remake is coming out under Steven Spielberg's direction to theaters in the next few weeks, which I'm definitely going to see West Side Story. I watched that when I was in sixth grade and it changed my life. It was an amazing musical. Like, it incorporated two things: my love of Shakespearean um, stories and Broadway musical theater magic. And he's done Sweeney Todd, Into the Woods, The Follies, Company. This man is a multi-Tony Award winning composer. I just want to say thank you. I never knew Stephen Sondheim personally, but what I will say is this: it's because of his music and the songs that he would create, the musicals that he would help bring to life, that inspired me to even, go into theater when I did, being at Pebblebrook High School. So, love you, Stephen Sondheim. I'm pretty sure he is at peace and, making more musical magic up in heaven. So, and I just found that out, y'all. Like, I really did, because I was getting ready for story time, and I happened to, post a picture, which, by the way, shout out to that little girl who drew that picture for me. It was very busy today, this morning, but I don't stress. Like, for me, being in my job is not a chore. It's really not a chore. I love what I do for people. I love being able to take care of people with the team that I work with. So, yeah, but I saw that and I was just really surprised. I was like, this is a joke, right? This has to be a joke. No, it was a legitimate post. I was like, wow. Because, you got to be careful when people post stuff on Facebook, because it'll be stuff from 2 or 3 years ago and y'all thinking it's from now. And I'm like, no, this is an old picture. But yeah, rest in peace, Stephen Sondheim. Oh, yes. Yerba mate has to be one of the best teas ever in the world. One of the best. Up there with oolong, English breakfast, real Japanese green tea, matcha, or jasmine. Sencha doesn't do it for me, but yeah, this is one of the best. Excuse me. We are listening to Mr. Ambiance with his medley of Dragonheart. Okay, for anybody that grew up in the 90s, because this movie came out in 96, you had a really good childhood if you know this movie. Dragonheart, where, like, this prince is sick and dying, and the king, his dad, makes a deal with the dragon of their country to use the dragon's magic to make it so that the prince won't die. But because, and the way that he does that is basically the dragon gives the prince his heart. So if something happens to the prince, something happens to the dragon. And because the prince has a dragon's heart, he becomes greedy and hateful and vengeful and just crazed. And it's a really good fantasy film. Dragonheart is an amazing fantasy film. There are sequels after that. The first sequel is pretty good. Anything after that, I can't say, because I haven't watched any of the subsequent sequels or prequels that have come after that. Yes, Dragonheart is still a thing in the world of media. But for those who grew up, shout out to my auntie Michelle for getting me into horror movies, fantasy films, and great sci-fi movies. Shout out to my auntie Michelle, who I wish was watching this, but she's more than likely working. But that's totally fine. But we are back with the Redwall series. And here we go. Because not only are we about to finish part 2, we're about to go into part 3 as well. And we don't have that much left, y'all. I am pushing myself to finish this book in the next week and a half. So, today, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday night, Tuesday night. Yeah, and just getting it done with, working out, of course. In between that time. Okay. Chapter 23. Constance stood on the parapet overlooking the road. Dawn was breaking behind her in the east. However, more important things troubled the Badger's mind. The abbot came bustling up with Basil limping in the rear. Both creatures looked extremely concerned. "Have you seen Matthias?" the abbot asked. "He's been missing from his room since yesterday afternoon." Basil looked rather shamefaced. "All my fault, I'm afraid. Should have kept my eye on the little rascal. We'll have to organize another search party." "No time for that," snapped the Badger. "Look!" Down the road in the distance, a long column of dust was rising. The three creatures sniffed the faint breeze. It was unmistakable. Clooney's army was coming to Redwall. "We'll need every available defender," Constance murmured. "No need to cause a panic, but this looks like a full-scale assault. The fox's warning was true." Jess, Winifred, Formole, and Ambrose were sent for. Together they leaned over the parapet, watching the dust cloud draw nearer. The beat of a drum was audible, and individual rats could be picked out. "They're heading right for us," said Jess grimly. "Better get all defenders to battle stations." At a given signal, John Churchmoss began tolling the attack warning upon the Joseph Bell. All through the abbey and its ground creatures stopped what they were doing. Picking up weapons they lay close to paw, they assembled at their appointed posts to await further orders. Clooney waved his standard above the sun-flecked dust, rising from the road. Gradually the horde ground to a halt. Shading his eye against the sun, he stared up at the walls. "Surrender to Clooney, the scourge!" he bellowed harshly. "Go and boil your head, rat!" came Constance's gruff reply. Clooney took a pace back, letting his standard dip low. 2 score of sling rats ran forward, whirling their stone-laden weapons. They let fly a volley at the ramparts, shouting blood-curdling war cries. The stones clattered harmlessly off the wall and fell back to the road. Clooney cursed inwardly. For all his show of force and arrogance, he had made a strategical error. The defenders had the advantage. This soon became clear when a platoon of otters on the ramparts unleashed a rattling fusillade of heavy pebbles. Pandemonium broke out in the vanguard of Clooney's horde, with cries of agony as the pebbles found their marks. One stone actually struck Clooney's helmet. "Back to the ditch in the meadow! Stay out of their range!" Clooney did his best to keep his voice even. As the army retreated to safety, he was the last to go, willing himself to walk slowly, as if that were the way he had planned it. 4 rats lay dead near the wall, and Kilcody's drum still unattended in the road. Basil Staghair sniffed dryly. "Not a very well-organized initial sortie for the invincible horde. Our chaps took the wind out of their sails, what?" They don't have to wait till sun moves round," commented Formo. "But we don't!" cried Jess. "Bring the archers! Keep the slings going! Let's give that mob in the ditch something to think about!" Out in the safety of the meadow, Kilcody attempted to soothe Clooney's ego. What a sly old move of yours, sir. Littling them to a false sense of security. Makes me think they're winning. That's the game." I'm messing with my false whiskers. Unexpectedly, Kilcody received his reward for flattery at the wrong time. A thwack over his head from the standard. "Shut your mouth, ferret," Clooney said sourly. "Get me some sort of a command post rigged up here. Cheese Thief, where are the gangs with the battering ram?" "Coming up right away, Chief," called Cheese Thief as he trotted off to find where the ram carriers had got to. It was not long before the tiny harvest mouse archers were bending their bows, sending small pointed shafts darting into the ditch. These, supplemented by the stouter arrows of the field mice and the otter slingers, caused many wounds and great discomfort to the would-be attackers, pinning a good number of them down. What that was about, but I'm back. Morale was low because Clooney had ordered no retaliation until after midday. Jess Squirrel rambled swiftly down to the road on a rope. Looping the rope's end around the old water butt that had been the ferret's drum, she sprang inside, calling up to the parapet, "Haul away, Constance!" The barrel fairly flew up under the badger's strong paws. Jess was quite pleased with herself. She had plans for the drum to beat the rats. Basil Staghair strode the parapet with a swagger stick tucked beneath his arm. He dodged around the squirrel, who was rolling the barrel along. Retaining the dignity befitting his rank, Basil kept up a constant stream of orders. "Fire at will, you mouse types! Otters, pick up your targets! Any moles here? Report to full mole down in the grounds right away!" The hare had cast off his leg bandage. Now that he was back in active service, the honorable war wound was completely forgotten. Meanwhile, back at the meadow, Clooney sat brooding under a makeshift tent. At least the ferret was good for something. Cheese Thief came hurrying up, urging on the contingent of battering ram carriers. Hoping to find favor with Clooney, he had put himself at the head of the party, helping them to carry the cumbersome object. "Come on, mates," he cried. "Let's knock on the abbey door." Having negotiated the ditch, they charged across the road. Once they had passed a certain point, it created a difficult angle for the defenders of the wall to fire at them. The massive ram shuddered as it smashed against the gatehouse door. With Cheese Thief shouting encouragement, the ram carriers took a short run back and battered the door again. Clooney was heartened to see things going right for a change. There was more to Cheese Thief than he had first thought. The door was rammed a third time. Now creatures on the wall stood up in full view as they retaliated by firing down on the ram carriers. Clooney called up his best slingers and archers, ordering them to pick off the defenders. Fortunately for him, the sun was starting to move southwards, and the otters and mice on the ramparts were clearly visible. Clooney's archers caused numerous casualties, forcing the defenders to drop below the parapet. The battering ram continued, although as yet it had made no lasting impression upon the solid construction. Missiles from the wall had slackened off, giving Clooney's horde a chance to desert the ditch for the relative safety of the meadows. Clooney appeared well satisfied for the moment. He called Kilcody to his side. "This is more like it, ferret. Right! Get the tunnel gangs. Gather your weasels, stoats, and ferrets. Take them back along the ditch to the southeast corner of the abbey wall. When it is dark, I'll send you a signal. Then you can start tunneling through the ditch wall, across the road and under the abbey wall. Is that clear?" Kilcody threw an elaborate salute. "Sure, it's clear as the morning dew, your honor." Clooney closed his eyes, intent upon keeping his present good mood. "Then get going. Try to get it right this time." The battle continued sporadically all day and into the evening. The ram carriers kept up their attack, but somehow the great door withstood them. When the last vestiges of twilight were gone, Constance called the captains together. They squatted beneath the parapet in darkness as the badger outlined the situation. "Listen, we're all right for the moment, but sooner or later something will have to be done with the battering ram. Has anyone got a good idea? I'm open to sensible suggestions." Below them the ram kept up its remorseless battering. Ambrose Spike had reported some minor splintering at the top and side edges of the door, but the shoring of earthworks was holding out. Formole had assured them that any attempt tunneling would take at least a few days before signs showed. Meanwhile, he and his moles were carefully monitoring the earth in the abbey walls. Throughout the day-long battle, the animals not directly involved in the fighting had been busy too. Father Abbot was tending the wounded in Great Hall. Friar Hugo was constantly sending Cornflower and her helpers back and forth to the ramparts with food and drink. Mrs. Churchmouse and Mrs. Vole were making bandages from old clean sheets. Silent Sam had been left with Tim and Tess, the Churchmouse twins. He had played with the infants until they fell asleep in a heap of bandages. Sam wanted to go out upon the wall with his parents, had forbidden it. Slipping out of Great Hall, he passed the time for a bit, listening with an ear to the ground in the company of the moles. But soon Sam became bored. He stabbed at the earth with his tiny dagger, imagining that rats were popping up from make-believe tunnels. After a while, he wandered over to the foot of the wall and sat sharing some food with Jess. The little squirrel signaled to his parent, asking her what she wanted the big barrel for. Jess Squirrel took her little son upon her knee and explained she had an idea for the barrel, filled with something or other, could be dropped down upon the ram carriers, but she was not too sure what it would be best to fill the barrel with. Sam jumped down from his mother's knee. The barrel was lying on its side. He sprang up on it and walked it about, rolling it very skillfully under his feet. All the time he was sucking hard on his paw, trying to think of how he could help. Always sucking on his paws. The tunnel gangs lounged about, leaning on the sides of the ditch. Kilconey stretched full length on a mossy patch. I tell you, this is the life, better than getting shot at. Me old mother always said, get a good job and keep your head down. Scumnose came creeping along in the darkness. He nudged the ferret. Clooney says you can begin tunneling now. Kilconey marked across on the ditch wall with his claw. Right you are. We'll start about here, buccos. Come on now. Dig for victory. And that is the end of part 2 of the Redwall book. Part 3, The Warrior. Chapter 1. Oh, by the way, y'all, so I was watching Pirates of the Caribbean last night. Great movie. I understand people are going to have issue with me watching that because of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation, but I don't know their life. I don't necessarily agree with either party of how it went down and what is continuing to go down, but I'm just watching the movie for entertainment. But it dawned on me, and I wasn't sure about this, and comment below if you can. Is there a book series that the movie is based off of? I know that Disney has had a ride called Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's part of where the movie is based off of that ride. But is that ride based off of a book series or a novel? And if so, who is the author and how do I find them and how do I read it on Storytime? If you know what I'm talking about, if you have that information, please politely comment below. Just some food for thought. Chapter 1. The invasion at Redwall continued throughout the night, the whole scene illuminated by a bright summer moon. Neither side gave the other any quarter. When the main action went into a lull, sporadic sniping would break out. Bow, lance, sling, and spear, all coming into play with deadly effect. One thing that remained constant throughout the battle was the sound of the battering ram pounding away remorselessly at the Abbey Gatehouse. Clooney made it his duty to assess personally the progress at the tunnel workings. He was scathingly critical of the small hole that had been gouged into the side of the ditch, roundly cursing any creature who dared to complain of difficult obstacles. "Can't get past the rocks and tree roots, my eye!" he snarled. "Stupid idle laziness! That's what's holding up the progress of this tunnel! I'll be around first thing tomorrow to see how much farther you lot have dug. And if it's not to my liking, I'll cave it in and bury the whole shrieking crowd of you." However, the battering ram pleased Clooney much more. He knew it was worrying the Abbey defenders. The rat crews that manned the heavy object were changed every hour by Cheese Thief, who stayed with the ram the whole time, encouraging the carriers on to greater efforts. Clooney had gained a new respect for Cheese Thief. Mentally, he had already promoted him to second in command, sensing this had made Cheese Thief redouble his efforts. He worked the rat crews like a slave driver. No rodent dare complain about one whom the chief held in such high regard. Constance stood on the wall with her captains. The Badger's brow was furrowed with anxiety. Basil Stackhair, the most seasoned campaigner among them, was the only one who apparently took it all quite lightly. "'Pon my word," he chuckled. "The way those blighters down there are carrying on with the jolly old ram. They won't need to tunnel in soon. I'll give it half a day at most, and we'll have rats piling in over the shoring, what?" Ambrose Spike positively bristled at the nonchalant hair. "Well, I might say that is a comforting thought to know. Any more little gems of information to cheer us up, eh?" Basil strode up in high dudgeon, re-emphasizing his previously forgotten limp. "Dearie me, old lad, no need to be so touchy. Merely making a military observation, you know." Constance called the two old friends together. Look, it's no use quarreling amongst ourselves. We should be thinking of a solution. Come on, you two. Stop sulking and be pals again. Smiling sheepishly, Basil and Ambrose shook paws. Winifred the Otter pounded the stones of the parapet in frustration. I say, there's got to be a way to stop that confounded ram. We've lost far too many defenders. They get picked off every time they stand up to retaliate. It's got to be a very simple solution, a small, obvious thing that we've all missed. Jess Squirrel, aided by Silent Sam, maneuvered the barrel up onto the rampart. She patted it. Something simple! Like this! The captains gathered around the barrel, examining it. The top had been covered over with gauze. A strange noise issued from within. Well, Jess, don't keep us in suspense. What's in the barrel? The badger growled. Shall we tell them, Sam? Grinned Jess. Silent Sam gave a broad wink and tapped a well-sucked paw against his nose. He and his mother were enjoying this. What we have here, my good comrades-at-arms, said Jess grandly, is stage 1 of our anti-battering ram scene. Thanks to my small offspring here, we found the hornet's nest. Basil clapped the two squirrels soundly upon their backs. Of course! That's the ticket, a hornet's nest in a barrel! Just chuck it down to the beastly old enemy, what? Jess and Sam smiled with wicked delight. Ha! But that's only the first stage, said Jess. Here's the second. She and Sam ducked out of sight. A moment later, they were back with 2 buckets. 2 pails of good, fine, slick vegetable oil, Jess announced. The minute they drop the battering ram, we'll tip this down all over it. Let's see them try to break a door with it then. Jess and Sam were congratulated heartily by all. Smiles appeared on faces that had been gloomy shortly before. Sam bowed graciously each time he was thanked. Nobody was refusing him permission to be up on the wall now. Down below, the scrambling of rats' feet and the monotonous thud of the ram continued. Winifred and Constance lifted the barrel onto the parapet edge. They angled and tipped it until a fine, delicate balance had been achieved. The badger peered over at the activity below, waiting for the best moment. She beckoned Silent Sam to her. The time was exactly right. Pray, would you do us the honor, Master Samuel? Said Constance with mock courtliness. Feigning an equal gravity, Sam made an elegant leg and delivered a short, sharp kick to the barrel. Buzzing angrily, it dropped out of sight over the edge of the abbey wall. There was a crash and a yell, followed by the shocked screams of agonized rats. They milled about in the roadway, dancing in pain as myriads of maddened hornets attacked furiously. Some rats ran off down the road, others hurled themselves into the ditch, pursued by the relentless, stinging insects. The long battering ram lay unguarded, conveniently spotlighted by the rats' abandoned torches. 2 well-aimed buckets full of vegetable oil were hurled down. They smashed directly on target, saturating the entire length of the ram. Ouch. Whew. Bad habit, kids. Don't do that. Before the hornets could seek out new victims, Basil ordered the defenders down to the gatehouse study, where they had a celebration snack. Clooney stood inside the tunnel working, surrounded by as many of his followers as he could pack in without causing mass suffocation. Kilconey held Clooney's cloak over the entrance hole. Outside, the air resounded with buzzing and pitiful screams. The ferret gingerly touched the tip of his swollen nose. Clooney stooped in stony silence. He did not sit or attempt to touch his own injuries. The others might laugh. Dumbly, he endured the pain of his fiery stings. Farther across the meadows, there was a mass scramble of bodies into a small pool. The hornets zinged about, waiting for snouts to break the surface. Dawn revealed a sadly disorganized horde. Clooney wisely held back his temper. Many of his soldiers looked so demoralized that they were liable to make a run for it and desert. He reasoned that there was little to be gained by adding insult to injury. 7 rats, 2 ferrets, and a stoat lay dead in the ditch. Unable to escape the main body of hornets, they had been stung so many times it had proved fatal. Cheese Thief limped slowly up, covered in ugly lumps. Chief, they poured some stuff over the battering ram. We can't hold on to it. We tried, but it's like trying to pick up a wet eel. The blasted thing slid right out of our claws. One of the bears had both legs broken when it slipped and fell. Sorry, Chief, but we didn't expect them to think anything up like that. Hornets and slippery stuff. It's not fair! Game over, man! Game over! If you know, you know. Clooney pointed out across the meadow. Regroup the army over there. Let them feed and rest. Let someone scouting for dock leaves to rub on those stings. I'm going into my tent to do some serious planning. We're not beaten yet. Not by a long chalk. They can't produce a hornet's nest every day. Clooney stumped off dejectedly, rubbing his backside with one claw. Ooh, they stuck him on the butt. There were 1 or 2 instant sting casualties to be treated at the Abbey Infirmary. Fortunately, Brother Rufus had a specific compound that he invented some years back to deal with such emergencies as summer stings. Silent Sam was reenacting the entire episode in pantomime for the benefit of Tim and Jess and some other infant creatures. They were in tucks of laughter at his antics as Sam slapped at his fur and performed somersaults with comical expression on his face. Constance and the captains assembled back on the wall after a few hours' rest. They could see no immediate threat from the horde licking their wounds across the meadow. This gave ample opportunity to assess the damage caused to the gatehouse door. Jess Squirrel was lowered over the ramparts on a rope. She went swiftly down and inspected the door. In a short while she was back up again to report that there were many deep dents and at least 2 long cracks. The old gatehouse door was still holding well. Constance decided that later on they could lower some carpenters and smiths to deal with the repairs. Of late, the Badger had become preoccupied with an idea that was rapidly turning into an obsession. Cut off the head and the body would die. By some means, she must kill Clooney the Scourge. Out across the meadow, she could plainly see the warlord's tent. In the strong sunlight, the Badger watched the silhouette of the big rat moving about behind the canvas. The main problem was that the tent had been pitched too far out of range for sling or bow. Unless the weapon was big and powerful enough to reach that far. That was it. A large, powerful bow, something along the lines of a crossbow. What if it could be mounted upon the ramparts, unknown to Clooney and his horde? At a given time, say mid-afternoon, Clooney's shadow would be clearly visible through the tent fabric in the bright June sunlight. A big arrow or bolt properly aimed from the bow and twang! Exit Clooney. Delighted with the plan, Constance shared her knowledge with only one other creature, a solitary beaver. Enlisting the aid of the beaver's highly capable molars, the Badger left him gnawing away at a Yule sapling in the orchard, while she went off to find an arrow that would fit her brainchild. An ash staff that had seen service as a candle snuffer proved to be ideal. With a heavy stone, Constance flattened the conical brass extinguisher fitted to the top of the staff until it resembled a vicious-looking spear. She flinted it with duck feathers. Oh, I thought I heard something. A thin-plated climbing rope rubbed with beeswax made an excellent bowstring. With the help of the beaver, Constance bent the Yule sapling against the abbey wall and struck it to the right tension. Together they mounted it upon a dining table with nails and strapping and bore it up to the ramparts. Constance would only grunt brusquely at anyone inquiring what the strange contraption was for, only she and the Badger needed to know that. The 2 creatures sat out upon the ramparts sharing lunch, conversing in low, secretive tones. That should do the trick. Aye, let's keep our paws crossed that it does. We'll only get 1 shot. Ha! 1 shot is all we need. Shall we wait until the sun is past its zenith? That way we can see him clear. So, when the sun passed its zenith, that's like... zenith is to describe the topmost point, the highest point of its day. So, the sun at its zenith would be noontime. So, at 12 noon, that's when the sun is at its peak position. Just like the moon is at its peak position... well, when the moon is out midnight. So the peak position would be midnight for the moon. And then, of course, it goes down to the other side. Then the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. See, kids? We learn something new every day. Every day. Constantly learning. Good idea. When the Joseph bell tolls mid-afternoon should be best. Having finished lunch, the pair lay out like old watchdogs on the sun-warmed stones. Half an hour later, they were snoring. Clooney was a resourceful rat. He often wished that his army thought as he did, instead of being just a mob of incompetents. But then as the horde were clever as he was, there would be no need of a leader. Such was life, he reflected. Nobody could think up a new strategy as he could. At this time, Clooney reckoned that he had hit upon a foolproof plan. He strode across the meadow and handpicked 30-odd rats. "Follow me," Clooney rapped. "Cheese thief, I'm leaving you in charge until I get back." Without another word, Clooney marched off with his selected rodents, first to the upturned hay cart in the ditch down the road, then a quick circle around into Mossflower Wood. Like his predecessor, Redtooth, Cheese Thief was ambitious. He interpreted Clooney's order as the much-coveted promotion to second-in-command. The chief had not even acknowledged Darklaw. In his elation, Cheese Thief even forgot the painful hornet stings. He strutted about, asserting his newfound authority. "Darklaw, send those ferrets out for more dock leaves." "Will you?" he ordered. "Oh, and see that no one else strays too far. I'll be in the tent if you need me for anything, but try not to disturb me." Darklaw scowled resentfully. There it is, that's a scowl. Nevertheless, he carried out the orders. If he didn't, he was certain that Cheese Thief would report him to Clooney for insubordination. Cheese Thief swaggered into the tent and glanced around. Clooney had left the better part of a wood pigeon, some cheese, and there was still a handsome measure of the best St. Ninian barley wine in the chief's canteen. Cheese Thief tucked in with satisfaction. Redtooth used to, so why not he? It was his entitlement as Clooney's second-in-command. He sprawled languidly in the warlord's chair, tilting it and resting his feet on the map-strewn camp table, happy in the knowledge that his destiny was being fulfilled. He secretly hoped that it would start raining heavily, then the rest of the army would recognize his exalted position when they were outside getting soaked, while he was snug and dry inside the tent. Cheese Thief tried studying the maps. He could not make head or tail of them and soon grew restless. There was Clooney's poisoned tail barb, which he wore in battle. Careful not to pierce his claws by accident, he fitted it upon his own tail. Next he draped the warlord's cloak about him. It was a bit long, but what a dashing figure he must cut. For a while he contemplated the massive war helmet. Peeping around the tent flap, he checked that there was no sign of the chief returning. Good. Clooney would probably be gone for another hour or two yet. The Joseph bell tolled for mid-afternoon. See what's happening? Constance shook the beaver into wakefulness. Look, what a golden opportunity. There's the Scourge himself all dressed up to kill. We'll never get another chance like this. The giant bow worked perfectly. Cheese Thief's latest promotion was swift but brief. He never knew what it was that snuffed his light out. Twang! And that is where we will end for tonight, because we only have 15 chapters in part 3. So we'll be on chapter 2 tomorrow. Get my hair retwisted. I hope everybody is having a lovely Friday night. Please stay warm. Be good to each other. And I will see you all next time. Bye, y'all.